Welcome and thanks for joining me for the Gut Health Turnaround Series 2.0. 21 ways to heal your gut, reclaim your energy, and look and feel amazing. My name is Leah Kline, Health and Wholeness Coach, and I'm your host. Today I'm being joined again by Dr. Justin Marchegiani.
You got it.
Thank you for being
Tongue
here.
twister.
And he is going to be talking about your thyroid-gut connection. Dr. Justin Marchegiani is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst with a degree in kinesiology and pre-medical studies. Dr. Justin has completed his doctorate degree in chiropractic medicine at Life West University, and he has completed postgraduate studies in the area of clinical nutrition, rehabilitative exercise, and functional medicine, so he can offer the most cutting-edge techniques to help address his patients' growing healthcare needs. Dr. Justin works with a wide variety of patients, all the way from athletes trying to increase performance and heal from injuries to everyday people with chronic health challenges. Using a holistic approach, Dr. Justin addresses core underlying barriers to health, which allow his patients to heal faster and feel better, of course. All right, so to get us started, how did you first start, getting involved or learning about gut health?
So off the bat, I just studied from a lot of people a lot of doctors that were just really going above and beyond getting clinical success. Because my motto has always been follow people that are successful. Don't reinvent the wheel. Typically, the pioneers get these slings and arrows, so to speak. So success leaves footprints. Who are the people that are getting the best clinical outcomes? I mean, you can sit there and dig your head in the research all day long, but then the question is, how do you apply what it is you're doing and actually communicate it in a way that gets people to be compliant and do it and get them better? So I always looked at people that had those trademarks behind them and they were really getting results with patients. So you got your thyroid, you got your hormone specialist, you got your heavy metal doctors. And I found that the gut was really the most important piece because that's where the interplay with all of the building blocks for the hormones, right? Nutrients, vitamins, cholesterol, fats came in to your gut. That's where all those were absorbed and that, got broken down and got assimilated by the body so you could make those building blocks to make you feel good and have the hormones to help you rebuild. Also, that's where a lot of your immune system is located, about 70 to 80%. And we know autoimmune disease is on the rise today. So if we have immune imbalance, really it makes sense to look at the area of the body where most of those immune cells reside, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the gut was just so important. And I saw a lot of people that just wouldn't get better, and we dig deeper and there were underlying infections that was preventing absorption issues, malabsorption essentially, or just creating lots of inflammation and getting the immune system off kilter and creating autoimmunity.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. So if somebody doesn't have kind of your typical gut symptoms, how would they know that they had gut issues going on?
Yeah, that's such a great question because I see so many patients that have extra intestinal symptoms, meaning they have gut issues, whether it's an infection or some kind of malabsorption or a leaky gut kind of presentation. But a lot of their symptoms aren't the bloating, the gas, the diarrhea, the acid reflux.
Yeah,
The obvious things. They're extra intestinal, meaning it could be migraine headaches, it could be muscle pain, it could be mood issues, depression, anxiety, PMS. And that's where it's really hard because conventional medicine just kind of tags drug symptom, and it's obvious, right? So if it's digestive issues, it's, you're going to be given a Prilosec, or if it's like, diarrhea, it's like, it's going to be like Metamucil, or if it's constipation, it's going to be some type of prokinetic, right? They're going to give you different things for the symptom. But we know in functional medicine, you can have digestive issues and it may not manifest, meaning you could have a digestive imbalance, but it may not manifest in those typical symptoms. And that's where it's like, well, what do you do? Because that PMS or that thyroid or that depression may be an underlying gut issue. And that's where having the functional medicine mindset, obviously knowing the diet, because the diet's the foundation. We know that most conventional physicians, if they aren't taking outside training, they get about maybe a week's worth of course load of nutrition. I mean, I met doctors that went to Stanford and Harvard, and they had an optional nutrition course that was online. They could just skip the material, take the test at the end, and it's typically disease-oriented. It's, hey, what causes scurvy? Vitamin C deficiency. What causes beriberi? B1 deficiency. It's like very disease-oriented. Where we're looking at things from a functional perspective, not necessarily a disease perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In the way you're looking at it. So to get to our, kind of topic of the day, how do kind of the thyroid issues connect with what's happening in the gut?
Well, just from kind of a common sense perspective, we know we need certain nutrients to make thyroid hormone, right?
Yeah.
We obviously need iodine, right? That's when you have the T molecule. The T basically stands for thyroid hormone or tyrosine. And the numbers like T4 means 4 molecules of iodine.
Yeah.
T3, which is our active thyroid hormone, is 3 molecules of iodine. We need nutrients like selenium, which helps with the building blocks of the deiodinase enzyme, which help activate thyroid hormone. Vitamin A, copper, zinc, magnesium, obviously protein like tyrosine. These are all important nutrients that are needed to actually build that thyroid hormone and or help convert or activate thyroid hormone. So it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that if we're eating a poor diet, then we're not getting those building blocks. And number 2, if we have a malabsorption, whether there's inflammation from food allergies, whether we have stress and we're not making enough hydrochloric acid or enzymes, or if we have an infection, whether it's SIBO, fungal overgrowth, parasitic overgrowth, H. pylori, or dysbiotic overgrowth, those are going to impede and essentially create a bottleneck with all those nutrients getting in there and helping to either make the thyroid hormone or convert it and activate it.
Mm-hmm. So just thinking about those particular things, how do we usually, at least if we're eating well, get some of those nutrients that we're needing to make that? And, so where do we get our iodine and our protein and, things like that from?
Well, there's a really good app you can get on your phone. It's called Chronometer. It's a good app because you can plug in your foods and it will tell you the nutrition in those foods. There's also a site I use called healthaliciousness.com, and it's a good site because you can just say, all right, what are the top 10 foods for iodine? What are the top 10 foods for this? And it gives you a lot of those foods. Now, I choose a paleo template because a paleo template is going to automatically include nutrient-dense, anti-inflammatory, low-toxin foods and foods that we have kind of had enough time to evolutionarily evolve to, right? Grains kind of only the last 10,000 years, meats, millions of years, vegetables, millions of years, starchy tubers, millions of years. So try to eat foods that we've had access to for a long time so our body can assimilate it and not create inflammation. That's number 1. Typically, if we're eating animal meats, especially organ meats, are always going to be the most nutrient dense. That's always a good first step. Vegetables, nutrient density. Egg yolks, nutrient dense. So I'm just going to pop on here real quick and just put in iodine, for instance, and you're going to see all the foods that are the highest in iodine. Typically, seaweeds are going to be good, shrimp, turkey, tuna, eggs, cod, right? Seaweeds obviously number 1. So you can see how there's a lot of paleo foods on that list that are going to have iodine in it. Now, iodine is a double-edged sword because I think the RDA, it's either 150 or 250 micrograms. So I typically get my patients up to at least 250 to start. We got to be careful because if we have Hashimoto's or an autoimmune condition, the iodination process spits out this inflammatory molecule called hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, and that can exacerbate inflammation. It can cause more of these B cells, these immune cells from the immune system. They can come in and they can attack the thyroid more. So we want to make sure we don't get too much iodine, keep it at a couple hundred mics initially, get the inflammation down. One of the first things we do to get the inflammation down in the thyroid, obviously diet, right? We already talked about that. Healthy proteins, healthy fats, and the right amount of carbohydrates. And then number 2, adequate amounts of selenium. Selenium will take that hydrogen peroxide, it'll take that hydrogen off there and make it H2O. So now instead of being H2O2, now it's water. So then it becomes this innocuous compound versus this inflammatory compound. So, and again, I use the word template. I hate the word diet because diet's kind of fixed, plus it has the word diet in it. It doesn't sound too fun, right? So a template, it gives us the ability to have flexibility in our macronutrients, meaning protein, fats, and carbs. So, I mean, I like the word paleo because it kind of engenders, biological accordance, biological harmony. It's what we've been around the longest, number one. But two, it's the nutrient density and the anti-inflammatory aspects that I like, meaning we're not eating excessive omega-6 fatty acids. Ideally, it's going to be organic, not all the pesticides and the inflammatory foods, keeping out the grains and the refined dairy and the legumes and maybe even the autoimmune piece. If we do an autoimmune paleo template, we cut out the nuts, the seeds, the nightshades, and the eggs. Because not that they're bad, but for some people, if there's already inflammation, it's like walking into a kitchen full of gas. You spark a match, the whole thing's going to go up. So the goal is get the gasoline out of there before we add any potential inflammatory foods, even if they're healthy.
Mm-hmm. All right. So have you noticed any difference? I know particular areas of the country are really sledding poor on the soil, and some areas are, high on the soil and stuff. I know we tend to get, unfortunately, our food tends to come from all over the place. So it's probably less of an issue than it was, years ago when everything was local. But is it more localized as far as deficiencies in those?
Well, I mean, you have like the goiter belt with iodine, right? Certain parts of the Midwest that are just lower in iodine. So that's always a key nutrient to look at.
Yeah.
Regarding eating organics, always going to be better just because the USDA organic standards, they keep on changing it. But for the most part, it's 3 years of a soil not having pesticides. And soil that does not have pesticide exposure is going to have better nutrient levels, and the plants are going to be able to take in those nutrients and or minerals. So you're going to get better mineralization and vitamins from the food in an organic environment, number one. Number two, using high quality minerals on your food, like a real salt or a Celtic or Himalayan sea salt will be nice because minerals act like activators, so to speak. Drinking clean water with minerals in it too. And then also having a high quality multivitamin that's going to give you, a good baseline of nutrients. Couple hundred mics of iodine, couple hundred milligrams of magnesium, 20 or 30 milligrams of zinc, maybe a couple milligrams of copper, just give you a good baseline of those nutrients that kind of like your insurance policy, so to speak.
Yeah. That's how I feel about multis too.
Yeah, exactly.
Filling in the holes that might be there.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell patients, right, supplements aren't called replacements. They're called supplements. They're meant to supplement a really good, healthy diet. So the foundation is a diet and lifestyle. And diet means what you eat, but also do you eat enough of it, right? And then also, are you skipping meals? Because skipping meals and things like that, if you're adrenally stressed or thyroid stressed, can create blood sugar swings. And that can really stimulate the adrenals to kind of fill in those blood sugar gaps. So the more the adrenals are called to action, if you already have kind of weaker adrenal reserves or this kind of HPA axis brain stress from the adrenals, that can create more problems. So meal timing is good, and also eating enough calories. I see people that think they're doing a great job, but then we count up their calories and they're going a little bit too low calorie. And just go online and type in hypocaloric diets and hypothyroidism, or low calories and hypothyroidism, you'll see a strong connection. Because the body automatically shuts down the metabolism. The thyroid's the thermostat of the body, essentially. So it turns down the thermostat when you have less fuel in the tank, so to speak. Got to conserve energy.
Yeah, so that makes a certain amount of sense and connection when you have people that are on like a calorie restricted, diet type thing. Then all of a sudden, gee, they have thyroid issues.
100%.
Yeah, it's reset lower because it's not using as much.
Exactly. And also people can be eating a really healthy diet, but if they have digestive impediments to those foods, meaning low hydrochloric acid and enzymes, those foods can be a stressor because then they just don't digest. It's like having really healthy food that's in your fridge. Well, leave that food that's in your fridge on the counter for a couple of days. It won't look too healthy in a few days.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing what happens in your stomach. It just sits there, it rots, it ferments, it acidifies, it putrefies, rots in your body, creates actually more toxins, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why you get food poisoning eating food when it's out too long. Well, the same thing kind of happens in your body when it's not digested. So making sure you break down those healthy foods really is essential.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of where a little bit of food combining can kind of come into play in that. as far as how fast it goes through the system and what we put together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so as far as specifically, supporting the thyroid in the process, obviously you want to, go back and work on the gut issues going on. But so would you supplement iodine and, some of those, kind of building blocks if you felt like they were too low in those?
So off the bat, anyone that comes in and we do a kind of a workup and we find they have Hashimoto's or some kind of elevation in thyroid antibodies, whether it's thyroid peroxidase or TPO or thyroid globulin antibodies, we avoid iodine outside of what's in a multi and what's in like your typical food intake outside of seaweed. So all the foods on the list outside of iodine, salt, and seaweed, we accept. So, cod, eggs, tuna, fish, shrimp, they can still have those, but we just keep it to those, keep it to maybe a couple hundred mics, that's what's in their multivitamin, and that's it until we work on getting the inflammation down through diet, through blood sugar, through lifestyle, through selenium, and through getting underlying gut infections addressed. I see things like Blastocystis hominis, H. pylori, Yersinia enterocolitica, Epstein-Barr, many other infections can really exacerbate the autoimmunity. Also, vitamin D deficiency, low protein, right? Low protein means low glutathione. Glutathione helps keep the antibodies in check too. So all those things are really important to really kind of get the thyroid kind of calm and relaxed before you taper up the iodine. Mm-hmm. When I taper it up, I do it gradually. I do it slowly, maybe 100 to 150 to 200 mics per week, but it's under a watchful eye. So we're doing it very slowly. We're getting all of our ducks in a row before we add that piece in.
Mm-hmm. So to keep it from, going overboard into the autoimmune, thing, whether they have that already or it's.
Yeah, if they already have it, what we're trying to do is, correct. We're just trying to prevent that exacerbation of hydrogen peroxide and prevent those B cells from really coming in and attacking the thyroid.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. So when you go about, obviously we're creating balance in the gut and getting back to that, what do you do? What are some of the things you suggest doing in that?
So the first thing is stop feeding the bad crap and stuff in the gut, right? Obviously sugar, refined foods, vegetable oils, all those things, cut them out, right? Now, outside of that, a lot of your listeners are probably already healthy, maybe on a paleo type of shtick or some kind of really good whole food type of diet, which is great. So that's already good. So then making sure you're able to break down your food. That's a good next step. Because like I mentioned, right, with the analogy of putting healthy food on the counter, it can rot. We got to make sure we're breaking down our food appropriately. If we've kind of crossed those two things off our list, well, the next thing is figuring out what kind of infections are present. Because those things won't go away with healthy diet and lifestyle and sleep and meditation. We can't meditate our way away from an infection. If that's there, we got to help knock it out. Now, stress is important because the more stressed we are, the more it shuts down or the more activates our fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system. The more our fight or flight is activated, the more that suppresses our hydrochloric acid and enzyme secretions. Think about it. Why? Because the blood is moving to the extremities to fight and flee and not going to the core. So the more parasympathetic, the more that blood goes to the core, the more we can get those digestive juices going. So stress does help, prevent good digestion. So if we can handle that stress, that's a good first step. But if we already have infections, we want to make sure we test those and we treat them specifically to what infection's there, whether it's a parasite. For instance, I just saw a patient just before you who we had her thyroid under control, really good levels. We had all of her levels dialed in. Antibodies were actually got negative, which is great. You don't hear about Hashimoto's people going negative with their antibodies, meaning they're not showing up anymore. This lady went abroad. I went to Europe, came back. Antibodies were all elevated. Her thyroid hormone actually had dropped 50%, meaning her levels have dropped about 50%. No change in dose. So what my hypothesis is that the inflammation in her gut is what drove that issue. So on the lab test that we had run, we also ran a stool test side by side. She had an elevation in gluten antibodies. So she got exposed to gluten on her trip. So that drove inflammation. Her thyroid antibodies went up. We know there's a correlation in the research between gluten exposure and thyroid antibodies increasing. So we have that. And she also came back positive with a fungal overgrowth and a blastocystis hominis infection. So my hypothesis is the fact that the inflammation from the food and these two major infections really created more malabsorption in the gut, made it like a sieve, and she's not really absorbing much of that thyroid hormone. Plus, when we have increased thyroid antibody levels, it can block the receptor sites from taking in thyroid hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like going into a parking lot and people put cones in all the parking spots. You can't park your car in there. Yeah. It's like a cone is in that receptor site, so that hormone can't get in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's see. I'm thinking I heard that chlorine can interfere with the absorption.
Well, any type of halide, right? Chlorine, bromine, fluoride, right? These are all halides. That's seventh periodic table, that seventh row in the periodic table elements. They can block that receptor that the iodine sits in. Mm. And that's important because it can pinch hit for iodine making thyroid hormone. That's why when you take iodine, sometimes you can get this kind of halide detox where you push out bromines or push out chlorines or fluorides from exposure, whether it's chlorines in water, bromines in refined bakery goods, and polybrominated ethers, meaning the flame retardants in mattresses and such, and also fluoride in water as well, next to the chlorine.
Yeah.
Polybrominated diphenyl ethers, PBDEs.
Okay. All right. So is there anything that you particularly like to suggest to prevent the imbalance from happening?
Well, off the bat, managing stress is helpful because if we don't have stress in check, that's going to create imbalances in being able to digest food, right? So chewing your food well, not drinking or not trying to hydrate with meals, trying to drink 10, 15 minutes before or in between meals. That's a good first step. A little bit of meditation can be helpful to get that parasympathetic nervous system going, the rest and digest nervous system going. Obviously, eating a healthy paleo template according to what your metabolic type is. So the right amount of carbs, proteins, and fats for you, and making sure you're able to break it down. That's a good first step, because a lot of people that are listening to this, they probably already have these issues, and that may not be enough, or they may already be doing that. And that's where it comes kind of looking at what these underlying stressors can be. And also most people that have these things, they may also have mood issues and energy issues. And that's where supporting the adrenals are really important because that's kind of like your natural anti-inflammatory system. Your adrenals help regulate energy, inflammation, and they are a backup generator to a lot of your sex hormones, especially for menopausal females. So women that are perimenopausal, let's say age 47 to 52, in the menopausal, the postmenopausal range, 50 and up, a lot of their hormones now is going to be coming from their adrenal glands in the form of DHEA sulfate. So as they transition to menopause, they're going to be leaning more on their adrenals to buffer out those sex hormones that were coming from their ovaries. So women get really hard when they're stressed and they transition to menopause to really set up for essentially a menopause from hell. If those female hormones aren't there, you're going to look at libido going downhill, brain fog, inability to build muscle. So if you're not building muscle, you're building fat. It's one or the other, right? You're going to have hair issues, meaning hair loss or just lack of volume or just, the niceness to your hair, the hair quality is lessened. You're going to have skin issues, more wrinkles, maybe joint issues. Hormones are lower. It's hard to build bone too, right? So a whole bunch of issues come up, depression, anxiety, mood issues, maybe even sleep issues, the obvious hot flashes and vaginal dryness too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I have run into this, personally with a client and with myself where when the thyroid was lower that, there was more hair loss. That the hair was thinning more than it normally, did. I mean, obviously we lose hair all the time, but it was more than the usual. And we're thinking, okay, hold it, something's may not be right at the thyroid right now because something's out of whack here.
100%. I did an article on this a few years back, but thyroid hormone is needed to help the hair follicle grow. So with low thyroid hormone, that can be a big impediment to hair growth. I mean, you see it in women. The first thing you see is the outer third of the eyebrow going. And then typically you see hair loss, on the scalp in general. And you can also see the opposite too with elevations in insulin and like kind of this polycystic ovarian syndrome presence. You see the jawline, peach fuzz come in, you see the top of the upper lip, and you'll see more in the navel area too. So it's a double-edged sword. You typically see that type of presentation, the hair loss in women 40 and up, and you see the polycystic ovarian syndrome women, 35 and below, essentially. Mm-hmm. But the other piece too is the gut, because if we're not able to break down protein and fat, that really becomes the building block for your hair.
Yeah. Yeah. You
so
don't
gut
have
issues got to be looked at too. And then just to kind of piggyback too, we talked about gut bacteria balance. You already asked me a question on that earlier. With healthy gut bacteria levels, we make this enzyme called sulfatase. And sulfatase is really important because we have certain levels of T3 called T3 acetic acid and T3 sulfate that's in our gut. About 20% of our T3 lives as T3 sulfate or T3 acetic acid. So it's not really active, but with that healthy gut bacteria, that sulfatase enzyme's higher, so that sulfatase enzyme activates the T3 sulfate and the T3 acetic acid. So I said a lot right there, so let me back up. But what I just said was 20% of your thyroid hormone that is inactive is in your gut. With healthy gut bacteria, that activates about 20% of thyroid hormone in your gut. So you get a 20% boost in thyroid hormone with healthy gut bacteria levels. So you get about 20% boost with good bacteria. So that's a really important piece where you can be looking at the thyroid all day long and miss the gut and miss that 20% bump, right? It's the difference between getting a B- on a test versus an A+, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a huge difference, and very obvious connection between the two that people need to be aware of. So
and B vitamins are really important for the thyroid too, right? And healthy gut bacteria makes those B vitamins, right? Healthy gut bacteria eats poop and poops nutrition. Bad bacteria eats nutrition and poops poop. So essentially, good bacteria provides nutrition. Bad bacteria makes you more toxic. And steals your nutrients at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, very helpful. So what would you suggest is something that our listeners could actually, do today to help them?
Well, first off, take audit of your diet. If you're eating any grains or refined sugar, pull it out. If you're skipping meals, pull it out. If you already know right now that you have autoimmunity, and you're not doing anything about it, and you're eating the grains, obviously that we already touched upon that, but 200 micrograms of selenium is a really good starting point. Selenomethionine, that's a really good start. And if you find yourself skipping meals, if you're skipping breakfast, blood sugar swings can really exacerbate your thyroid because it can stimulate certain cells in the immune system called interleukins, and it also will stimulate your adrenals to have to work harder to pick up that blood sugar. Right? So your adrenals can either be focused on fighting inflammation and making sex hormones, or you can have it doing stupid things like regulating blood sugar. Not that it's stupid, but you can do that by just eating correctly and take that stress off it and have it do something that's higher priority in the body. That make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Most people, unfortunately, don't seem to realize how much the sugars, and I mean all types of sugars, the stress that actually puts on the body just processing that. And
when your body gets a bunch of refined sugar in real world, B vitamins and minerals are attached to that, right? So then your body runs what's called the Krebs cycle, where it goes through all these different pathways. Fumarate, malate, succinate, it runs these different pathways, and nutrients are needed for these pathways to run. So if you're getting a whole bunch of refined sugar that essentially does not have these nutrients I just mentioned, then essentially your body has to rob Peter to pay Paul. It has to dig in and use nutrients from other things that you've eaten to metabolize that sugar.
Yeah.
So it essentially creates nutrient debt. That's why, the paleo template that I mentioned, the key thing is nutrient density. Every food gives you something. It doesn't take away something.
Yeah. I think the word is escaping me right at the moment, but an anti-nutrient.
Yeah.
What sugar is. It's the opposite of a nutrient.
Yeah, essentially is an anti-nutrient, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And then not to mention it, sugar burns dirty, right? Sugar is like burning diesel fuel, right? You drive behind a diesel truck, you smell the exhaust, not too pretty. That's what happens with sugar, because you get this whole glycation process. Proteins get sugar coated. This whole glycation is, why diabetics lose their eyes, or they, get gangrenous limbs, because that sugar is really toxic to nerves and tissue at high levels at prolonged periods. So it's a magnet for free radical stress. Free radicals just come in and they just chip away at the DNA, chip away at tissue and create inflammation. Now, acutely, it's not a big deal, but chronically, it's an issue. That's why, look at diabetes mellitus. Mellitus just means sweet. And they diagnosed it essentially sweet urine. They would drink people's urine back 100 plus years ago, and they would see that the urine tasted sweet. Now, God, I would hate to have that job, right? I mean, my God. So essentially, there's this overflow of sugar because the body couldn't metabolize, right? It's a dirty fuel. It's like, that's why the diesel truck really smells terrible when you're behind it, because all that fuel isn't burned. All that sugar goes out the urine, and it creates inflammation all the way through the system.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that was very, very interesting. I actually had an uncle that had type 1 diabetes and went through that whole about everything bad that you could imagine connected with that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you were talking about as far as why there's just a whole system breakdown, basically, over time, in that situation. And so you've had a whole lot of great information for us today. You want to tell us about your free giveaway for our listeners?
Yeah, so off the bat, I like to go in depth. I like to kind of keep it go into the science and the nitty gritty, but then take a step back and make it applicable. Because if you can't use it, forget it. It's just not worth it. It's just, unless you're going to go on Jeopardy anytime soon, it's not worth it, right? So first thing is, if people want more intel, my website, justinhealth.com. And while you're there, you can check out my YouTube videos. Click on the YouTube button there and subscribe, or the podcast there as well. My podcast is Beyond Wellness Radio. With Evan Brand, we go in and we dive into these topics in a kind of a fun, bantering kind of way. While you're on the site, I have a thyroid and female hormone video series where we dig deep into these topics, where you can subscribe and get more information about how female hormones are connected to all this from a functional medicine perspective, which is the branch of medicine that gets to the root cause, like we talked about today, and also a whole series on thyroid hormones as well, looking at all the things we talked about more in depth. And while you're there too, I have some complimentary consults available, but in my clinic, I'm booked out months on end. So while you're there, you could schedule there, or you could also reach out to me and just schedule a consult up front if you want to dig in deeper and roll up your sleeves and get to the root cause of what's going on. And I'm available for patients worldwide. I have patients in all countries, all states in the U.S., all countries. So Skype and phone tends to be a really awesome resource.
I would agree there. Thank you so much, Dr. Justin, for joining me again this year. And thanks to everyone for listening. Come back tomorrow for more of the Gut Health Turnaround series.
Thanks a lot, Leah, and I appreciate this platform so we can really help more people out there.
All right.